Please welcome organisational culture expert and the creator and author of The Rules of Belonging, Fiona Robertson.
Hello, it's so great to be with you. When I was 14 years old, I went on a school camp. It was my third one and I dreaded them. But this one was different. I was excited because just before the camp, we'd been given one of those forms you fill in where they ask you who you want to bunk with. And I had miraculously been put into a cabin with the cool girls. Now, I certainly hadn't put their name on my list, so I figured one of them must have put my name on their list. And I thought that I had won the social lottery. And the first night went really well. There am I, up on my top bunk, lights out, there's banter, we're telling funny stories, everybody's laughing. And I drifted off into this blissful, happy sleep of contentment. You know, that one where you know that you're safe and you know that you're welcome and you know that you really, really belong with this group of people. Turns out, not so much. So night two didn't go quite as well. There am I in my top bunk, lights are out, and I just happened to slide my hand underneath my pillow. It was a complete accident, but I felt something weird under there. There was this little coiled up piece of string. And I didn't want to make an idiot of myself, so I didn't draw attention to it. I didn't ask anybody or make a noise or anything. I just quietly went about trying to figure out where were the ends of this coiled up piece of string. And I traced one down behind me, down the wall, and it disappeared down, I assume, to the bunk below. And then I found the other end and figured out that traced it up the wall behind me, and it went over a hook that was holding a poster and disappeared behind this poster. And I thought, I couldn't work out what was going on. And then I realised that the poster was sitting away from the wall a little bit in this kind of odd angle. So of course I look behind the poster, and what I find is a bunch of wet wipes had been fashioned into a kind of makeshift ball and had been tied to the other end of this string. So then it dawns upon me that the cunning plan of my cabin mates was for the girl in the bunk below. She was going to yank on this piece of string and the whole wet mess was going to slap me in the face and, hilarity would ensue. The one thing I'm really proud of in this story is that because I figured this out before they'd done it, I slowly but surely pulled the string up until I had the end of it in my hand, and so I foiled their cunning plan. But far more importantly, I lie there on night two, in the dark, staring at the ceiling for hours with tears running down my face, because that feeling of rejection, knowing that, especially when you thought you belonged, and then you figure out, no, you really do not belong in this group. And I tell this because I think all of us have had an experience like that. And it really hurts. I mean, we've all been the kid who finds out that they weren't invited to the birthday party, or the old chestnut of being chosen last for the sports team. And that stuff really hurts. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I learned why that kind of rejection really hurts quite so much. There's a fantastic researcher by the name of Matthew Lieberman. He heads up the social cognitive neuroscience team at UCLA. And he and his team did this fascinating experiment that proves that the human brain cannot distinguish between social pain and physical pain. Now, I think this experiment is so fascinating. I'm going to describe it to you because it helps to illustrate how they could possibly tell that we can't tell the difference between social pain and physical pain. So firstly, they used some newer technology. So it's called a functional MRI machine. You'd be familiar with the traditional MRI machine, the big tube that you lie in. And of course, scientists we can't do much while we're lying in a big tube. But this functional MRI machine is one where you can wear it on your head. And so the scientists can study us while we're actually in the middle of doing stuff. And so they did this with this experiment. They put one on the subject's head and they told the subject of the experiment that they were going to be playing a game of ball with two other people. And what I mean is throwing a virtual ball between themselves and two other people who were sitting in front of computers elsewhere. Now, the reality is there were no other people. This was a computer simulation, but the subject of the experiment didn't know that. So round one of the experiment, the subject is told, I'm really sorry, we're having problems with our connection. Could you please just wait a moment and watch the other two people throwing the ball between them for a minute? Now, of course, what they were doing at this point was getting a baseline to see what that person's brain was doing while they watched the two people throwing the ball. But then round two of the experiment, they're told, okay, our connection problems are fixed now. You can join in. So for a while, the ball's being randomly thrown between the three people. But after a little while, the other two people start throwing it between them again. So the person who's the subject of the experiment is watching the identical thing, except the first time round, they believed that they couldn't participate. And the second time round, they believed that they were being deliberately excluded. And sure enough, all the pain centres in their brain lit up like a Christmas tree. Exactly the same pain centres that light up when you hit your thumb with a hammer. So we can't distinguish between social pain and physical pain. The question, of course, is why does this matter? And what on earth has it got to do with organisational culture? It's because our brains have not changed for 80,000 years. Genetic evolution is glacially slow. So we've got a brain in our head which is not designed for the world that we've created for ourselves. And the further implication of that is that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that thing we're all taught at school, you know, the pyramid-shaped model, and on the bottom of it, it says food, water, and shelter are the most basic needs of human beings. Well, that might have been true for Maslow in his time, but 80,000 years ago, if we were not a member of a group, we couldn't get access to food, water, and shelter, and we would die. So even though we live in this world now, our brains are 80,000 years old, and they still believe that if we are not a member of a group, we will die. How does this relate to organisational culture? Culture is the rules of belonging in the group that you join. Think about the last time you joined a new group. We have evolutionary superpowers that allow us to figure out what behaviour earns belonging in this group and what behaviour loses belonging in the group. And just a simple little example, if you started a new job and you show up at 8:30 in the morning and you figure out that everybody else has been there since 8, next day, you're showing up at 8, right? We look at what's successful behaviour in the group that we join, and we adopt that behaviour as our own. And that is what organisational culture is. It is what are the rules of belonging in this place? What behaviour earns me belonging and what behaviour loses me belonging? And right now, all the rules of belonging in our groups are shifting fundamentally. The question is it happening by accident? Or if you're a leader, are you making sure it's really deliberate? Have you asked yourself the question, are the behaviours I want to see more of given greater status in this place? Do they earn greater belonging? In your own team, what are the behaviours that earn belonging and what are the behaviours that lose belonging? Our cultures, our team and organisational cultures are changing right now. So my question to you is, will you let it happen by accident? Or will you make sure that you set the rules of belonging in a very deliberate way? I've been Fiona Robertson. It's been great to be with you.
Please welcome Australia's foremost communication, leadership and influence expert, Chris Helder.
Okay, it's Chris Helder here, and first and foremost, I just want to say, it's so great to be a part of this conference, to be a part of this showcase, and be along with all these other great speakers, trying to really help people decide what's going to be important moving forward. I, Chris Helder, have been a speaker for the last 18 years. I have done over 2,500 presentations around the world, and man, live presentations. And it seems like in some ways it's a lifetime ago in a way with all this crazy world that we're in right now. But having said that, right now, This is going to be an absolutely critical next 12 months of conferencing, absolutely critical next 12 months to help organizations grow and have the resilience and mindset to make a difference. So right now it's going to be more important than ever to get the right speaker in that actually talks about the right stuff. This is not going to be a time where people want to be entertained, and I don't think it's going to be a time where people want to talk about what might be. I think this is a time where people need skills and tools to actually make themselves more resilient. Now, just quickly, my background is psychology, sociology. I graduated from a place called Colorado State University. I was a part, going all the way back, of the Bill Clinton administration. I spent 2 years working with underprivileged kids in a place called Compton, California, straight out of Compton. And you know what? I was lured over to beautiful Australia some 20 plus years ago. And I know the accent hasn't changed that much, but been working with Australian businesses and Australian organizations for a very, very long time. I wrote a book 5 years ago, and here was the hook of the book, as it was this: positive thinking doesn't work. All right, I'd be absolutely clear. The studies show it does not. Positive thinking is not going to actually be the thing that's going to help people get themselves out of this hole. It's not going to be the thing that's actually to what they need to be resilient. Don't tell people to be positive, because positive thinking, well, and negative thinking are both emotive thinking. I wrote a book 5 years ago called Useful Belief. And useful belief is about useful thinking. It's about practical thinking. It's about pragmatic thinking. And well, Wiley Publishing now tell me that's the highest selling business book in Australian history. Now, what are we talking about? We're talking about this idea of useful belief. Useful belief is different than positive or negative, right? It's different than positive thinking. Because if you've been in a rut the last 6 months, and many, many, many people have, if you've been in a rut the last 6 months, to get from 0 to 2, it is not positive thinking that's going to get you there. To get from 2 to 5, it's not positive that's going to get you there. To get from 5 to 8, it's not positive that's going to get you there. Instead, it's this word, useful. What's the most useful thing for you to do to get from 0 to 2? What are the most useful actions for you to take to get from 2 to 5? What are the most useful belief systems for you to actually have about the world to get from 5 to 8? Now, all of a sudden, we start to think about, hang on, what's useful, what's not? Let me talk about the brain, because right now, in an era of resilience, in an era of actually regaining our power, we need to be clear about how the brain works. We have a filter. That filter decides to show us what we see. Now, when I say this, by the way, the filter is called the reticular activating system, and you do not have to remember that. Understand you have a filter. We must control our filter. It works a little bit like this. I imagine the last time you got in a motor vehicle and you were driving around, you did not see any red Toyotas. They did not show up anywhere. But if you all of a sudden decided to buy a red Toyota, next time you get in a motor vehicle, you're driving, guess what? You're going to start to see red Toyotas everywhere. That right there is your reticular activating system. It shows you what you see. It is no different with results. It is no different with how we view this time, how we view this COVID time and a post-COVID time or a dealing with COVID time. And here's the thing. Well, let's give you some useful beliefs. Just right now, this is the best time in the history of the world to be alive. Gee, that'd be a tough sell right now, wouldn't it? That'd be a tough. This is the best time in the history of the world to be alive. Is it true? Well, that brings us to our second point. See, truth. Possibly a little bit overrated. I think we got to decide, well, we create certainly an element of our truth in our life. And so let's just be clear about something. Positive thinking doesn't work. And truth is something that we have a lot of influence over. Is it true? I don't know. But I know this one. I believe it's the best time in the history of the world to be alive. I walk outside and what do I see? I see a tree and a flower and a puppy and a baby, and I'll find beautiful things in the world. And you know what? We look at this, it is no different with opportunity today. There are opportunities everywhere. We get a lot of people who do not believe this, by the way. They've shut their brains down. They've shut their filters down. And so they say things like this: it's tough times, Chris. Tough times. Now, it is challenging times, right? These are unprecedented COVID times. I'm not saying that. But having said that, getting these people to a place of resilience where they have a brain that's going to go out there and look for opportunities instead of actually tough times. And by the way, a lot of people believe in tough times. And for those people out there, I say, listen, I don't want to ruin your day. They're like, Chris, I'm angry, cynical, jaded, and twisted, and I'm not changing anytime soon. All right, well, I can help you today, too. I'd watch a lot of news. Man, I'd get right onto the Today Show, and I'd watch the 12 o'clock news, the 4 o'clock news. I'd try to catch some nighttime news, watch Current Affair. I'd watch, look, you want to just suck into a little bit of a Bachelor in Paradise, maybe a little Love Island, just to really understand how it is a relationship should be formed. And don't worry, in no time at all, you'll be uber paranoid, and you will, in fact, see tough times everywhere. For the rest of you looking for opportunity. And as we train our brains for greatness, we train our brains with a useful belief. It looks a little bit like this. There are opportunities everywhere. That's a useful belief. As soon as we start to believe that, guess what? Our brain goes and finds those opportunities. You believe these are tough times, your brain shuts down. No more opportunities, right? We start thinking about all the useful beliefs that we can put together in terms of our life, all right, and our job and our business and where we are. We start to think about, how about this one? Life begins at insert age. If you're 70 years old right now, congratulations. Life begins at 70. That's a useful belief, right? A lot of people walking around going, oh, I'm getting old. It's like, how old are you? You're like, I'm 36. Life begins at 44. That's a useful belief if you're 44. Life begins at 22. That's a useful belief if you're 22. Whatever your reality is, this is an important thing. I'm not saying bad things don't happen. I'm not saying you don't have a reality. We all have a reality. We all have things that happen. I mean, again, I was lined up March 12th of March. I walked in the Adelaide Qantas Club and looked up, and I realized this thing was about to happen. I had 60 gigs lined up in 72 hours. I went from 60 presentations lined up internationally, nationally, and that went to 0 in 72 hours. And you know what? We need to help people understand that grieving, sometimes things like that are important, and grief is a useful part of any process. But then there's a point as well, we draw a line in the sand. You say, okay, enough grieving. Grieving no longer useful. What's going to be a more useful response? Let's learn about technology. Let's learn how we can present different platforms. Let's think about how it is that we can create time to spend. What's our silver linings right around this? What's the gift that COVID is giving you? This gave us a chance to stop and actually look around. Now we can start to think about how we can do things more effectively, efficiently, how it is that we can enter this new time and actually be the best version of what it is that we're going to bring to the table. This is the best time in the history of the world to be you. Is it true? I don't know, but I know it's useful. This is the best time in the history of the world to be insert situation. If you're single, this is the best time in the history of the world to be single. If you're single, best time in the history of the world to be in a relationship. If you're in a relationship, best time in the history of the world to be whatever your situation is. And we start to think about how that opens up the opportunities. A lot of people believe in tough times. A lot of people want to block it. So we start training our brain to think about it. In my keynote talks, I do a lot of, I talk about the mind-body loop, that once we get the mind right, that the body follows suit, and the critical nature of making sure that we're coming at every day with our posture, how it is we move our body, how we move our body affects how we think affects how we move our body. What the mind harbors, the body will manifest. We start to think about how do we manifest the best version of ourselves, how it is that we move, looking at people, smiling, driving from a place of gratitude. And how about a useful belief here? Energy is a decision. That we control our energy level as we go out there. We control how it is that we're going to go out there and impact people, out-energize the competition. I'll leave you in this brief time in our showcase with my favorite quote. My favorite quote is by a woman who, well, I think she had the most useful belief of anyone who ever walked planet Earth. Her amazing words, her amazing story. And she said this, Helen Keller said this, life is one of two things. It's either a daring adventure or it's absolutely nothing. I challenge you to go out there with a useful belief and make your life the daring adventure you want it to be. My name's Chris Elder. Thank you for your time.